Hello Stampers, Jackie Bolhuis from Klompen Stampers. I have a cute card today to share with you, actually 3 different cards, but we're going to do a little technique-y stuff. Now don't let the word technique scare you. I think sometimes we think of stamping techniques and we think of messy and complicated and lots of stuff. This really isn't messy or complicated or any of that. All we're going to do is a little bit of sponging with a sponge dauber to give a stamp a little bit more depth, a little bit more life to the stamp we have here. And I've got one card I'm going to make for you. I had to double check here. And then 2 other ones, actually 3 other ones, a little different version of what we're going to do today, to share with you, all using the stamp set called See the Good. And then we're going to do a little speckling, a little of this. Oh, another little technique-y thing where you use a marker on our stamp. So lots of little tips going on, but it's a super simple card, as is everything I share with you. And I hope you're going to like it. Let's turn around the camera here and let's get stamping. This is the stamp set that we're using. It's called See the Good, and it's a new one in this year's brand new annual catalog, and I absolutely love the greetings in this one. When I see the good in the world, I see you. I can't thank you enough. Just a great card for not only just thank you cards, but just to send to someone as encouragement or to a friend you haven't seen in a while. And it is a distinctive stamp, which means lots of detail in these stamps. You're gonna get a lot of color variation. So a few tricks that I really want to share with you is how to get some good depth in there, but not to kind of ruin the image, I guess. So the very first thing I want to talk about is with these stamps that have so much detail, sometimes our ink pads are just too juicy. And when they're too juicy, and I don't know if this one's too juicy or not, so let's just check it out. But when they're too juicy, you lose, and it is. If you look real closely, I don't see a lot of color variation in there. It's just too wet. So what I like to do is take a spoon. I call this my spoon trick. If you have followed me for a while, you've seen me do this often. But I just take my spoon and I push my ink out to the sides of the pad. I'm not wasting ink because when I'm done here, it's gonna all seep right back up to the middle and all's good. So let's just kind of get that ink off of there. And then we're gonna ink this up again. And now look at the difference we should see. See how it's not such a big old blob and there's more variation there. So if you feel like your image isn't coming out clear, that's the trick you need to do. So now a couple other tricks before we stamp our pear here is we're gonna ink it up, and that we're using the new Bumblebee color. And then I've got Pear Pizzazz and a little sponge dauber, I guess it's called. But I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna take my Pear Pizzazz and I'm gonna just kind of go around the edge on here, going right over that Bumblebee ink. So it's kind of like layering ink on there. And then one more thing before I stamp it, I'm taking an early espresso marker and I'm gonna come up here with my marker directly onto the stamp and get the brown on that stem. Now, let's see what it looks like. There we go. There's our image. You can see all the different color variation because of the detail in that stamp. Our stem is brown. You can see a little bit of that green kind of blending in on the side. And it just kind of gives our stamp a little bit more life than just a solid one color ink on there. So let's just set this aside for a second. And then I have a piece of cardstock here that is 3 3/4 by 2 3/4. Now don't worry about these measurements. I will have a blog post that goes with this video. You can find the link to it down in the video description, right below, right down there below where you're watching. And it will take you to that blog post, and I will list all the supplies I used along with the card recipe. It'll give you all the measurements and all the colors and all the supplies and so forth. So if you'd like to make this card, you'll be able to, as well as if you'd like to order any of these products I'm using today, you can just click right over there on the blog and go directly to my online store and place your order. So, and I just appreciate it so much when you select me to be your Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Now, I inked this up again as we're talking, and we're gonna take some more Pear Pizzazz and put it along the edge here, and put a little bit more of that early espresso on our stem, because to make my card, this Whisper White layer that I have, we're gonna stamp a second pear right down here. We'll kind of come over to the edge like so. We're just kind of building the layer of the card here. Then we're using all stamps from that one stamp set. So I have the little, we'll call it this little greenery or a branch here. And I want it to be a little bit lighter than this pear pizzazz is on its own. So I'm gonna stamp it on scrap paper, and then I'm gonna stamp it once right there. I'm not gonna ink it up, and I'm gonna move it over, and I'm gonna stamp it one more time. This I do a lot because it kind of gives me, again, some depth with some varying colors going on right there. And then let's grab Early Espresso. Speaking of Early Espresso, let's backtrack just a second. This is the Stampin' Write marker that I used. Do not use Stampin' Blends. Remember, there's two kinds of markers, Stampin' Write, Stampin' Blends. You don't want to use Stampin' Blends directly onto your stamp like I did. You need to use the Stampin' Write, your water-based markers, not your alcohol-based markers. So this kind of reminds you of that. And then we're going to take our greeting here. Let's not go upside down because I didn't put the label on there yet. And we're going to stamp it right over the greenery. Now, I'm going to cut this out with the scissors, but before I do that, to add just a little bit more depth to what we have going on here, we're going to use the speckle stamp. Now again, I've done this before, and there's various versions of the speckle stamp in some of the different stamp sets. This one is super heavy. So if you're gonna do it to just put real little speckles, you need to have an extremely light touch. See how light that is? Maybe we'll do it on white. I am like barely, barely, barely touching this. Okay, because we don't want this big old blob on our pear. So what I'm gonna do is just take this and really, really, really light. You can see how it just added a little bit of those speckles on there. Super light. That one's almost too heavy, but I think we'll be okay. So then with this one, let's go ahead and I'm gonna just take my scissors. There's no dies for this one, but it's super easy just to fussy cut, as we like to call it. We'll just cut around this one here. It's just personal preference, but when I cut out images, I do like to leave a little bit of white. I don't cut, you notice I'm not cutting right on the image. It kind of makes the image, I think, stand out and pop just a little bit more. So we are about ready to start putting this card together. So I have a layer of Early Espresso, and I think this is 3 7/8 by 2 7/8. Don't quote me on that though. I'll make sure that measurement's over on the website so you can double check. So we've layered that on there, and then our pear that we cut out, we're gonna just use some dimensionals on the back. You know me, we can't make a card without dimensionals. And we'll go ahead and we're gonna just kind of lean it the other way, offset it a little bit so that you can see that bottom pear. Now we'll bring in some linen thread. This truly is becoming my signature, I think, on almost all cards I make, but I like to double it. And then we're gonna just tie a bow here. Let's see if our fingers work today. And then just adjust that bow to the size that you want it. This stuff's easy to tie. I can't tie bows with ribbons at all. That's why, oops, let's pull that one. I tend to go to this one, and then with the double layer, I like to pull one piece just a little bit shorter so you can see both loops of that bow. We'll trim it off, and then we can just, I like to kind of make sure these little ends separate so you can see all 4 of them. We'll take a glue dot. I just kind of roll it over so it's a little bit smaller. And then we can pick that up with our little bow. We'll stick that right there. Now we're about ready to finish this off. I have a crumb cake card base, and then I also have a crumb cake layer here that's 5.5 by 3. And these are the little mini embossing folders. This one goes with the fern set. I cannot think of the name of it. It'll be on the blog post, I keep saying that. But these little mini embossing folders are designed to fit through the mini machine that's not available yet. However, it also works in the big machine, but they kind of give you some nice layers of texture without the whole front of your card. So I can take this 3-inch piece, and I'm gonna go ahead and just stick this in here, and I'm gonna go run that through my embossing machine, and I'll be right back. Okay, take that out of there, and then, you know, I like this liquid adhesive. It is always, has been, always probably will be my favorite adhesive. You can kind of see how much I put on there. Don't overdo it. We don't want it to goosh. We don't want it to warp our paper, but it holds really good, and I like that it kind of slides around. So as you're laying your layers down, you've got a little bit of grace there to move it around to get it exactly where you want it, and it sticks awesome. So there's that. And then I think we'll use some dimensionals underneath here as well. So let's go ahead and stick those. Now with your dimensionals, make sure you use those edges. I just pull them off and we'll stick them on like so. Yeah, we'll put one right there. The backs always look messy, but who cares? Nobody sees that, right? We'll go ahead and peel those off. There we go. And I'm gonna go ahead and we will stick that right on like so. So there is the front of our card. Now I'm going to show you the other ones that I've already made, and I did the insides of them as well and the envelopes. So we'll switch over to those. Now here's the one I pre-made the same way, and you can see I used the other embossing folder on there. So it just gives it a little bit different texture. Then for the inside, I always like to put Whisper White in there, and lately I find myself I've been layering some colored cardstock in as well. So here's the other greeting. I can't thank you enough. Put a little bit of those greenery branches in there. And then my envelope, I did the same. And then I used some coordinating designer series paper for my envelope flap. So super simple card, but we kind of have a lot going on here. The different colors of that pear pizzazz. Our pear, we used our sponge daubers and our Stampin' Right markers, and then some real light speckling. Now this stamp set also has the artichoke, which I love. This one I didn't do any speckling on the artichoke itself or sponging. That is just how that stamp stamps. There's a lot of detail in there. Again, make sure you use a spoon on your pads if you're not getting that detail. I did do a little speckling out here, and instead of using an embossing folder, I stamped our little greenery a little bit on that crumb cake. And then inside, I got the greenery, and I brought in the small flower that is also part of the stamp set. And in my envelope, we stamped the flower and greenery on the front and then also on the flap. So there's our second one. And then for this one, I didn't use the artichoke or the pear. I just used the branch here with some flowers. And I did use a die to just pop up the greeting on this one to make it look a little bit different. There's that same embossing folder I used. This time, it's actually not a layer. It's right on that card front. So before I put this together, I actually just stuck this in and embossed just that part of it and layered on top of it. And there's the inside of that one. And again, we've got our envelope with not only stamping, but our little flap has designer series paper as well. So there you go, 3 different cards using See the Good stamp set. Now remember, you can hop on over to my website. I'll have pictures of all these. I'll have the card recipe, a list of all of the supplies. If you'd like to order any of these supplies, you can do so right there. And make sure you reach out to me if you have any questions about these projects I did for you today, or any questions about Stampin' Up! Or quick and easy card making. I love to share with you guys. I'll be back again in a few more days with another video teaching you quick and easy card making. So until I stamp again, have a stamp happy day.